Achim Albrecht, basically, because he's a pro bodybuilder, he basically had no fat on his body. He jumped in the canoe with me, and I swear to God, Akira, he started turning blue. And I'm like, Achim, are you okay? He goes, no, I am freezing. I can't feel my fingers. Hey, Akira, you want to hear a pro wrestling story?
Please tell me about pro bodybuilder Brackus.
You want to hear about pro bodybuilder Achim Albrecht became pro wrestler Brackus. Is that the one?
Yeah.
All right, I've got a crazy story about him. But first, let me tell everyone a little history about Achim Albrecht. Achim Albrecht was one of the best pro bodybuilders in the world. At that time in the 90s was the classic era with Dorian Yates. So in 91, he was 9th place at the Mr.Olympia contest. I love pro bodybuilding so much I collected bodybuilding magazines and I had Achim Albrecht on my wall. In 96, he signed a contract with WWF where he competed in dark matches at In Your House. And in 97, he ended up on tour with me when Vince McMahon wanted him to get more experience, so he sent him out to ICW. In 97, after that, Vince started pushing him heavily, where he was calling out Big Van Vader and Triple H. In 1998, he entered the WWF Brawl for All, which was a shoot fighting tournament, which, like everyone else that entered that tournament, their career was doomed from the very start. He ended up losing to Savio Vega in the first round. After that, Achim Albrecht, Brackus, pretty much ended up fading out of pro wrestling. So there's a story in between there from 97 on tour with me, and it was such a crazy tour, I just had to tell the story. A tour so crazy, it ended up in Edge's book, Adam Copeland, On Edge. So here it is, never heard before story about Achim Albrecht, Brackus, on tour in 97. Dog Tales, here we go. Dog Tales, ooh, every day we're out here making dog tales, ooh. So Akira, this tour was absolutely crazy. So Vince, like I said before in some other stories, there was no feeder ground for WWF at that time. There was no NXT, right? So Vince had guys that he just signed but needed more experience come out on indie shows, right? So because where I was at the Harts, it had connection obviously to the Hart family. So he sent out some of their talent that he just signed to go on the tour. The company that they were running was ICW, International Championship Wrestling. I was on that tour, right? This tour was absolutely crazy. Anyone on that tour is going to tell you that it was one of the craziest tours they've ever been on in Canada. So on the tour was Edge, Christian, Joey Legend, guy called Blackbeard, Tyson Dukes, Bill Scullion, his tag team partner, Killer Kineric, and so many more. Honestly, I forgot who else was on that tour, right? So we were touring Canada in Ontario, and Vince, this is how I think played out. Vince wanted the WWF to be more involved in community and especially with Native Canadians. So he wanted them to be involved with the WWF. It would have helped them look like a charitable organization, right? So he organized a tour up on this reservation in Ontario called Moosonee and Moose Factory. And this was out in Woolpool. I mean, you couldn't just get to these reservations by normal ways. So we ended up having to take the bus that we all slept on. That's another story in itself. Then we caught an 8-hour train, or some ridiculous, it was insane. And then we ended up, we reached this reservation at like 4 a.m. and it was snowing. I mean, it was so cold that you couldn't feel your fingers. So picture this, right? It's snowing down, we're all freezing. We just took an 8-hour train ride. We get off the train, we jump in these forward drives that took us an hour to this lake, right? Akira, I'm not kidding you. 4 a.m, snow's coming down, we can't see a thing. We're in these vans shining the light onto this lake. In the lake waiting for us. It was so cold, the lake was frozen over. Waiting for us was 8 8 or 9 native Canadians in canoes, and they chipped the ice through the lake just to get to us, and we ended up, it was like, this is something out of a movie. We had to get in these canoes to get to the reservation at 4 a.m. Akira, and it was freezing. So Achim Albright, basically, because he's a pro bodybuilder, he basically had no fat on his body. He jumped in the canoe with me, and I swear to God, Akira, he started turning blue. And I'm like, Achim, are you okay? He goes, no, I am freezing. I can't feel my fingers. When we go, he was about to pass out. He was about to die. We ended up having to take him to the native Canadian hospital, where he had to be straight away put on a drip to defrost. Swear to God, he would have died that day. But, you know, thankfully he had some good doctors. He ended up joining us the next day. And when we got there, I mean, I could tell you a whole story about this Moosonee and Moose Factory. When we got there, the chief of the reservation, they actually just killed a moose. And they had just prepared it just for us, just for our arrival. So what I forgot to mention was Vince actually set up, we were there for 4 days at this reservation, and we were staying in log cabins. And Vince set up this program where we would do 2 shows there. They actually had this big, beautiful ice hockey arena where we did the shows at. And then the days in between, we were teaching the native Canadians wrestling. So it was really like, it was a program where WWE would come in and teach wrestling to the native Canadians. And it was really like a feel-good sort of piece for the news, you know? So that's what it was. Achim joined us the next day, and I remember the first show we did at the ice hockey arena. We were in a lumberjack match. He was one of the lumberjacks with me. I forget who it could have been. I think it was Christian versus Gothic Knight, and we were the lumberjacks. And man, Achim, he was a funny dude, you know. He would, of course, because he was trained by Bret Hart, you know, and The Rock, yeah. Also. A lot of people don't know that. So he was into ribbing. So another funny Achim story was he would make sure he was alone in the room, and he would let off the biggest fart, and Achim's farts were the stinkiest farts you'd ever smelled. And what he would do to be alone, he'd fart, he'd call out, and he'd pretend that he needed help. He'd go, help, somebody help me. And we would come running to the room thinking that he's in trouble. And then he would just wait for us to come in the room and then just laugh. Oh. And the smell, Akira, he would just laugh that he just stung us out. And he'd call them his protein farts. I had no idea what this guy ate. I'm sure he probably just ate that raw moose meat that was just left at the buffet for us. I had an incredible time with him. I thought he was a great guy in the short time that I got to know him. That tour was insane. I'm going to tell more stories from that tour, because actually it's one of the stories that Edge put in his book, where we rescued a husky pup from that reservation. Naming no names, but this is a crazy story. That dog ended up staying with Edge for so many years and ended up becoming a companion for his mum. So I'm going to tell you that story next, how we all helped Edge rescue the husky pup from that reservation on that. So there it is, my story about Achim Albright, Baracus in the WWF and on tour with me. You know, I would love to have seen what the Vince McMahon really had in store for Baracus. I mean, look, I know what a lot of you say, he wasn't a great wrestler, you know, he didn't really have much character to him, but I think through time he would have developed that. I don't think he was given enough chance. I really think if Vince really sort of worked with him, we could have seen something different from Achim Albright. So what do you think? Do you think there was no chance that Achim would have been famous as Baracus, or do you think given time he would have developed and we would have seen maybe a major superstar? Please leave your comments below. Let me know what you think, and if you remember Baracus in the WWF. And with that, it's a wrap.